A shout out to Books and Bounty partners, including Ink and Inspiration, event partners JNF Enterprises, Elevation Global Media Group, and the Chill Spot at Notre Maison. To discover more engagement and promo opportunities, please visit booksandbounty.com/events. All right, while we're waiting for Victoria, I just want to give you guys a little bit more about her. Many of you know her from her best-selling book that she co-authored with Mary Benedict. Excuse me. Many of you know her from the best-selling book, The Personal Librarian, for which she co-authored. So just to give you a little bit of a summary about Victoria before she logs in. Crisscrossing bestseller list since 2000 with over 30 novels to her byline, Victoria Christopher Murray's bibliography is as long as it is diverse. However, there is a common thread that I noticed. Whether familiar, platonic, or romantic, many of Murray's novels focus on deeply bonded relationships. And that remains in her most recent novel, Harlem Rhapsody, which I've been reading through live with all of you over the last few days. And in that story, Mary imagines the life and legacy of Jessie Redmond Fawcett and her love not only for the literary arts in Harlem, but for very married W.B.E. Du Bois. While the author Murray's early career was spent in corporate America, she began to pursue storytelling wholeheartedly in the late 1990s. Today, we'll talk to Victoria about transitioning careers, what it takes to write a best-selling work of historic fiction, and why Black editors need to read this book. In the meantime, I'm going to make sure everyone knows that we are live. All right, and I think Victoria is in the virtual She Suite. Let me go on. Let's see here. Oh, yes. Hold on 1 second. You can't hear me at 1 second. Let's see now. All right. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, very, very low.
Very low.
I have mine all the way up.
Let me see if I can make this a bit better.
I just got to my hotel. The train was late.
Oh wow, no problem. You're right on time here, and I know that this week, the last few weeks have been extremely busy for you. You are up and down, all around, doing things on that book tour.
I know. That's what I meant. Hold on 1 second. I'm gonna try to put this on something higher.
All right.
It might be too high. Probably better. Okay, this is better. Oh my goodness, I was rushing like crazy.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, even for taking the moment, despite your busy schedule, to have a chit chat with Books and Bounty and our viewers today. I really do appreciate it. I'm very excited about this moment.
Okay, can I do one thing? Can I
Yeah,
plug in my phones? I mean, my
do what you
cell
need to
phone.
do, of course.
Let me do that real quick. So sorry.
No, it's okay. It's the nature of the beast being a live streaming show, but all this can get cut and edited when highlights are posted.
Okay, I didn't want it to go out. Now
Yes,
you're
thank you.
still kind of low, so I don't know if it's me. And should I is this going to be taped or
Yes,
is
it
it
is.
live?
It is. We are live streaming right now, but what goes up later is a slightly cut or edited version. So we'll cut out all the dead space and all of that when it actually gets on to
Okay,
the
I am so
website and
sorry.
YouTube. It's okay. No, it's fine. It's fine. It's all
I look
right.
a mess, but I'm here.
Well, and that's the thing. What I always tell folks on my show, I want you guys to feel at home. This is supposed to be behind the scenes content around industry leaders and authors like yourself, Victoria. So, again, thank you. I want you to feel as comfortable as possible. And again, thanks for taking the time for Books and Bounty today.
Okay.
All right. So, we're going to hop right into it. Let me know if I'm too low and I'll try to speak up. But I looked at all of my audio monitoring here and I think we're okay. So I begin every interview with the question, where did your passion for storytelling begin? And I'm particularly interested in yours because I know that's not where your career started.
Yes, well, actually, I wanted to be a writer my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
My entire life. I always tell people I came out of my mother's womb wanting to be a writer.
Mm.
And I wrote my very first masterpiece when I was 7 years old.
Yes. Yes.
And people don't think you can write a masterpiece when you're seven, but you can
Mm-hmm.
if you plagiarize. I wrote something called Betty and the Witch, and it was about a little girl that wore a red hooded uniform to school. She
Mm-hmm.
had three bears who were her brothers and three pigs who were her sisters, and their best friends who lived next door were seven little people.
Oh my
And
goodness.
there was a good witch and a bad witch in there, and I can't really remember what they did. But my parents read it and gave it to my teacher, gave it to my second grade teacher. I didn't know that. But when I found out that they did, I found out because my teacher had the entire second grade perform it as a play.
Wow, that's
And
amazing.
and there are a couple of things. There are not a lot of things that I remember about that. I
Mm-hmm.
remember being told I could have the role I wanted because I had written it.
Well, of course.
And you're 7 years old, normally the teacher's telling you what you're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then I remember some of the rehearsals, and I remember being introduced at the end to the parents and everybody in the assembly as
Mm-hmm.
the writer. And I was seven. And that stayed with me. I've always wanted to be a writer since then. So that's where my passion began. I never knew anyone who was a writer before. Um, before that point, it just was, I wanted to be a writer because I love books and I love to read.
That sounds amazing, and I love hearing the stories. I always ask my guests. I start with this question because, one, it's fun to find the commonalities between storytellers. Oftentimes, it does start young, right? It does start with the traditional. I've always wanted to be a writer. I've known this forever. But your story, I love the fact how you know that someone recognized you and saw you in that moment. And instead of understanding it and saying this is plagiarism, right? No, it's fan
Yeah,
fiction, Victoria. Let's celebrate it. Let's see where this goes and spark more
yeah. I
stories
mean,
from
and
you.
think about all the adults who celebrated that. My
Yes.
parents first, my mom and my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And then they took it to a teacher, probably during one of those parent teacher conferences,
Mm-hmm.
and she celebrated it. Like nobody ever said to me, it wasn't until years and years later that I was like, that play that you wrote, Victoria, you stole the ideas from not only one, I just took, how they say, write what you know.
Mm-hmm. And
I
that
was
was
a
your
little
experience.
7 year
Yeah.
old who wrote what I knew.
Exactly. I think one of my earliest memories of writing creatively was I was maybe 8 years old, and I have gotten my first computer, and there was this software where you could do your own desktop publishing as a child, and I wrote a story about animals that came to life, like a traditional story, toys coming to life, something that kids always imagine, and it's having that adult support and motivation and enthusiasm behind your work, even as a child. I see it has sparked many of a famous storyteller today. So kudos to your teacher at that time. Kudos to your mom. And so that leads me into the second question. What happened between 7 year old Victoria and then college and financial success corporate lady Victoria? What
Yeah.
happened between then?
So that's a really good question. And the one thing that happened that didn't happen was I never lost the passion for writing.
Mm-hmm.
Never.
Mm.
Which is one of the reasons why I think I excelled in school. Because I love to read, I love to write. You throw some arithmetic in there, and
Mm-hmm.
you're a really good student. But I never lost a passion to write.
Mm-hmm.
But I never saw anybody who looked like me in a book.
Mm.
And I was 14 the first time a white librarian gave me, a white school librarian, gave me a book by a black author.
Mm.
And I was in high school, and the librarian knew I was always in there. I would go in there during free breaks. I would be in the library during lunch. I loved the library in the school, and I loved to read.
Mm-hmm.
And one day she pulled me aside and gave me a book and said, I ordered this book just for you. I was in a predominantly white
Wow.
high school. She
Mm-hmm.
said, I ordered this book just for you. I want you to read it.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the picture of the man on the back was a black man. And I was like, oh, what is he? What does he, is he part of the story? And she said, no, he's the writer.
Mm.
And it's a little embarrassing. I was 14 years old.
Well,
And the book was Native Son by Richard Wright.
there it is. Look, I can look right on over on my shelf and see it
Right there.
among the special
And from
ones.
that point forward, she just kept getting all kinds of books for me. And then my parents started going out and looking for black
Mm.
books for me.
Mm-hmm.
My dad got me a book called Man Child in the Promised Land, and he and I read it together. He bought 2 copies, and we read it together. I was 14 years old. So the challenge, though, was I was already thinking about college and what I could do with the career. And even though I wanted to write, I didn't know any writers. I'd never seen any writers,
Mm-hmm.
not
Mm-hmm.
not even not in person. And the only word I ever heard in front of writer was starving. And I didn't want to be a starving
Yeah.
writer. That's the only thing.
Yep.
I'd never heard of any success or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I ended up going to college, going to Hampton and majoring in communication disorders. And I only majored in communication disorders because I'd never heard of it before.
Yeah.
I was like, I heard of English, I heard of math, I heard of science. I want to do something I've never heard of. But when I loved it in theory, but when I had to leave out the classroom and we had to go do our student clinical things, I
Mm-hmm.
hated it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so then from Hampton, I went to Stern. I went to NYU's Graduate School of Business
Mm-hmm.
and got my MBA because I was still at that point doing what I thought I was supposed to do.
Mm.
Not doing what I wanted to do, but I was graduated from college, 21 years old, trying to set a career, and went to grad school, met my husband. My MBA was in marketing, his was in finance. And so I was still doing what I was supposed to do,
Mm-hmm.
not focused on the passion that was in my heart. And the thing that is such a blessing for me is that that passion never left me.
Yeah.
And my husband believed it. And so from the day we got married, he bought us a Apple IIe computer because he's like, my wife's going to be a writer.
Yes.
She needs a computer. So the Apple IIes were the first home computers,
Mm-hmm.
and they were as big as this room, like
Mm-hmm.
they were so huge, and they had the disc that you had to put in, and they had a blinking cursor.
Yep.
And they were really old. If we look at it now, they were really old. But then, by then, I was getting established in a career. I would
Mm-hmm.
always write. I would do, like when I had my own business, I did newsletters for my division, always with writing and people used to say, you're so good at writing, because I wouldn't just write a normal article.
Right.
You know, I had to write a whole big thing. I know at one point I was thinking about doing some substitute teaching,
Mm-hmm.
and you had to write an essay. And I got a letter back when I got the acceptance. They were like, but your essay, like, who are you?
Yes.
Because I didn't know how to write this. I always tried to tell it in a story.
Yeah.
And every year of my marriage, my husband would encourage me to write. Like New Year's resolutions, he would say, this is the year to write. And I would be like, okay, I'm going to do it this year. And then I would never do it. And
Mm.
I think it was a combination of things. I
Mm-hmm.
think it really was life got in the way,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and I used that as it was an easy
Yeah.
excuse
Yeah. Well,
that life got in the way.
let me
And it was
mark
an
that one
excuse
down.
because there was also some fear. Like, what am I going to do with this thing when I finish writing? How do you get published? I don't know how to get published. How does this happen? And every year I would make up new excuses. And 16 years into our marriage, my husband
Wow.
said to me, okay, I'm not going to ask you anymore about writing. He said, but one day you're going to be 80 years old, and you're going to be sitting on someone's porch, and you're going to be rocking in someone's rocking chair,
Mm.
and you're going to say, wow, I didn't even try. And I'm not kidding. That picture scared the daylights out of me.
Yeah.
And I realized something that happened. What happened was I had a desire to write. I really had a desire to write. But my resistance to writing was greater than my desire to write.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And when my husband painted that picture for me, my desire became higher than my resistance.
Yes.
And I always tell that story because that's what stops everybody from doing what they want to do. You really have a desire to do something, but if you're not doing it, that means your resistance is higher.
Mm.
And you have to do something to shift the scales.
Yes.
So that your desire, because once your desire becomes higher than your resistance, you will find a way to do it. And that's what I did. In 1997, I said, okay, I can never set, whenever I set the goal to do 3 pages or whatever I said, I never make it. And then I get depressed that I didn't make it.
Mm.
So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say I'm going to write 1 word a day. That was my commitment for 1997 because I knew I could make that commitment. I knew it. And so some days I would come home and I would be so tired I would just write she said. But I had sat in front of the computer and I met my commitment.
Yeah.
And there would be days when I came home and only felt like writing she said. But a whole chapter would come out of me or 2 paragraphs, whatever it was. But by setting that goal, I finished that book in 3 months.
Wow.
3 months. And it's really interesting. It takes me 2 years to write a book now because I know a lot more about writing. But I finished that book in 3 months. That was my very first novel, Temptation. And it was the very first time I was nominated for an NAACP Image Award.
Wow.
And I've been writing full time since then.
So tell me a little bit, because your husband was definitely in your corner. He has been, it seems like, your muse and motivating factor for quite some time now. But when it came to other folks in your life and in your family, Victoria, around that transition from a pretty stable, career and sustaining career to becoming a writer, what did you face from other family and friends? Were there critics and
supportive. Like
awesome?
My father was like, "You're gonna find," they remember the 7-year-old girl.
Yes, yes.
And so I remember my father sitting down next to me when I first wrote. I had written something I was gonna submit to Ebony magazine. They used to have this writing contest, and my father said to me, "So you're going to get back into your writing?" And I thought that was such a kind way for him to say it because I was in my 40s and he knew me as a 7-year-old girl.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother was supportive. One of my sisters said to me, "It's about time. You sure taking your time to be a writer."
Oh, wow.
Because once I decided to be a writer, I decided to go into it full time.
Yes.
I have been a full-time writer since 1997. And so the thing, that was a good question. Nobody ever asked me, about other people in my life, other people in my family.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they were all the wind beneath my wings. There was not one of them who said, "Really, you want to, this is going to be dangerous." Because my husband and I had a very successful business,
Mm-hmm.
and we had sold that business, so money didn't look like it was going to be a concern. That wasn't it. And my
Mm-hmm.
parents just really wanted me to do this thing that I wanted to do my whole
Yeah,
life,
they
and then
saw.
my husband wanted me to do it as well. And it kind of helped because with the first book,
Mm-hmm.
I self-published it at first, but then I got a contract with Time Warner. They were called Time Warner at the time. And my first book, think about this. My first book, I was nominated for an NAACP Image Award. My parents flew out from New York to LA. My husband and I lived in LA at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And just think about that. Like from there was no thought of me ever going to do anything else except being a writer. It was like God wanted to give me, my
They knew it. It
husband,
was
my
fate
parents, my best friend flew in from Dallas, her and her husband.
because they knew. Yeah.
Everybody, God wanted to give everybody the signal that this is the beginning for Victoria.
Exactly. That is wonderful. And I asked that question because I myself is going through a career transition in the moment where I'm going more from, publishing ops and product management and the business side of everything to wearing more of a content development editorial hat. I want to get closer to the authors. I want to get closer to you. I am entirely inspired and infected by Jesse Fawcett's persona and voice in this story. And so we're going to get into that even more because, and I think that's why I asked the question, because a lot of the self-publishing authors that I'm meeting and emerging creators that I'm meeting along this books and bounty journey, this isn't their first rodeo when it comes to finding a career or figuring out what their next path is going to be. And so, how, building that support system, having the right people on your team, so to speak, is really important in making sure you have that just wherewithal within you and that support and confidence that other folks can instill with you. So I think it's, kudos to your parents and your family for keeping that dream alive and your husband and transitioning to him to keeping that dream alive within you, Victoria, because if not, we would have not gotten such beautiful prose and literature that we have from you today. And so, again, like I just said, me transitioning from more of the business strategy side to the content development, I still wear that role a lot as an editor myself. And so I want to ask you some tips around sustaining yourself on the best-selling list, because from that time Temptation came out, not only have you been writing since then, you have been a successful writer since then, a popular writer since then, a well-received and acclaimed writer since then. So what are some tips that you have around the business strategy of writing, particularly, and we can start with like, where do you decide where do you want to go with your next book, or what your next project is going to be, and how do you strategize around it? What are some tips you could give for folks who want to get on that
So I
bestseller
don't know if
list?
I have a strategy about what my projects are going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I once heard Michael Jackson say that every song he was ever going to write was inside of him the moment he was born.
Yes.
And I got it because when I remember looking at the TV when I heard him say that and say, "Michael, you feel me?" Because I don't have a strategy. I believe that all the seeds of every book are inside of me. I think they were put there when I was born. Just like with every other organ inside of me, every story that I will ever write is already inside of me. What happens is that they grow at different speeds. Because I can remember one story that was in me for a long time. I remember thinking about it for my third book, and
Mm-hmm.
it became my 11th book.
Hmm.
I remember when I wrote Stand Your Ground in 2015, which was the book that I won the NAACP award for. I won it that year because
Mm-hmm.
I've been nominated so many times I felt like Susan Lucci. I kept getting nominated and never winning. But I finally won it for Stand Your Ground. And what was so interesting about that was an instant seed that became a book. So they grow at different speeds for me. I don't have a strategy. I just know when that story's ready to be told. And so, like, even the historical fiction, when it came to me through another author, I it was there already. It was there, and I just had to. It was coming out of me at the right time. I needed to write 25 other books to be ready to write some of the most important books in my career. But the other 25 laid the foundation. I didn't know I was doing that. So maybe I'm kind of bumbled my way and stumbled my way into the strategy. But all of those other books prepared me for a time such as this. So I don't know if I have a strategy. When it came time to writing Harlem Rhapsody, it was going to be my first solo historical project.
Yes.
I had done two other historical novels with an author, so I co-authored.
Yes.
When it came time to write my own, I wanted to write something not only important, but someone I could relate to at a time that I loved. So I always say Jessie Redmond Fawcett found me. Because I was thinking, okay, I'll write about the 1920s or the 1960s. So those are two different decades for sure. And then I wanted to write something
two significant,
in New York,
but very.
because I'm from New York.
I would say there are two significant, very significant moments in Black arts and Black literary history. So I could see why.
Yeah,
those are the two big.
And then when I said New York in 1920s New York, I was like, oh, Harlem Renaissance. So I was thinking about the time more than the person. And then that's why I say that Jessie found me, because when I started looking into the Harlem Renaissance, she came knocking on my door. And I just bumped into her. And when I heard her story on a podcast, and it was only 25 minutes, it was a podcast called Harlem on My Mind.
Okay.
I was like, oh, this is the lady I want to write about for sure.
And, I have a deep passion for the Harlem Renaissance. I studied it extensively in undergraduate years ago, and I was so shamed that I did not know or did not realize the significant impact. Like, she was the book influencer of her time. Like, she was the editor of her time. Like, she birthed the labor of love that she did to birth so many greats that we know today. I could say almost all Black writers, and definitely Black women writers of American literature, are standing on the shoulders of Jessie Redmond Fawcett.
All of us.
All of us.
All of us. Because not only did she birth those people that we've all admired, but her first novel, she wrote the first novel about the Black middle class.
Yep.
And that's all we write about. Our characters are Black middle class, some educated, some not, but that's who we write about. And none of this was accepted until she wrote about it.
Until she wrote it.
And so every book we write, every book we read became from Jessie Redmond Fawcett. And I always say that she started the Harlem Renaissance. Like, she should be the face of the Harlem Renaissance.
Definitely.
Because it was the launch party for her novel, There Is Confusion, that set it off. That's when they said, tonight begins the new Negro movement that we now call the Harlem Renaissance. But here's the thing. It wouldn't have been able to be a movement if it didn't have other things to follow her book. And so after Jessie was the first one. After Jessie, over the next few years, over 40 books were published by Black authors. Before that, there were, you could count one or two.
Right, yes.
They were all about slaves or servants. Because this was only the Harlem Renaissance.
50 years.
This is something that I just, not learned, but I got it. The Harlem Renaissance happened 50 years after slavery ended. Just 50 years.
Yes.
It wasn't 100. When you're growing up, it seems like it's so far away, but it was just 50 years.
Yep.
And these people were walking around with college degrees and masters, and W.E.B. Du Bois was the first Black man to get a PhD from Harvard.
Yep.
And so the Harlem Renaissance was the first time ever, ever that Black people looked in the mirror and saw pride.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was the first time because they had just taken the shackles off of us.
Literally. I mean,
And so Jessie Redmond Fawcett, she set it off. And I'm so excited to be able to give her her flowers.
and it's more than just giving her flowers. You are breathing new life into her. The way you and I want to this is I want to talk a little bit more about some of the research that journey that you went on, some of the firsthand sources that you discovered, because how I want to know how you were able to invoke Jessie's editor persona. I literally have in my, I don't know, you can't see it, but in my reading journal here, I have 2 pages of quotes from the book all around how to inspire an editor. What should an editor's role be? How should my relationship be with my writers and colleagues? And it's all about I'm giving something, like they are blessing me, right? The writers are blessing me. It's an honor to be in their presence. What did she say? She's looking at Pocahontas, one of the administrative assistants in the NAACP offices, who wants to write, and she says it's another blessing to see the desire and determination in her eyes. Or when she's with County Cullen, and she's just gushing over the fact that, like, no, you're writing for me and I'm so excited to be in your presence. And he's like, what, 17, 15 or something like that. And I just really, I think, especially for Black editors, I think this is a great book and inspiration around what a editor's role, what role we play in writers' lives. And so there's two parts to this question. One, how did you discover that persona in Jessie? And then what's your relationship like with your editors? So let's start.
So,
Mm-hmm.
so as I've been writing over the last 28 years, it
Mm-hmm.
has not always been a day at the beach. And especially after 2007, when the world kind of went digital,
Mm-hmm.
it really affected our sales. So I had to do other things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have been an editor. I probably have edited probably 50, 60 books for authors, and I taught writing classes quite a bit, writing workshops online.
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't hard for me to pick up that persona. That's just who I was as an editor. And then I think it's because of how I am as an editor that I have a great relationship with my editor.
Mm-hmm.
I've had some of the best editors in the business. I've had editors who have challenged me and have taken me far. And it's because I understand their role. And their role is to take any great book. You can write a great book, but they can take it higher for you.
Yes. Now, when it comes to the research that you found around Jessie Redmond Fawcett, how did you choose what to go into the book and what did not go into the book? Because I know when I was looking at, I was consistently reading your book and then going to Google, like not fact checking, but just saying, did this really happen? I can't believe this really happened. Like her giving Du Bois and Nina anniversary celebration.
The anniversary
Oh
party,
my
that really
goodness,
happened.
it really happened, and I think the timeline was different, but it just really happened, and so.
The timeline for the anniversary was perfect
Mm-hmm.
in the book. So it was real. This was an easy book. I don't want to say easy because this book, like, I bled on the pages. But what was easy was what to decide. I just wanted to talk about her life as a literary editor.
Mm-hmm.
And so that meant it was just 1919 to 1925. So it didn't make it hard because, and that's the thing that I think you have to do in historical fiction. We don't want to tell a cradle to a grave story. We're not writing a we're not writing a biography or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So what you want to do, the only people I will choose to write is I'm looking for their accomplishments and their achievements, their major accomplishment and their achievement. And then I write the story around that.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes you'll have to do a flashback to show who they were as a child. But I'm not trying to write their childhood. I'm not trying to write their later years. If if I'm writing about the literary editor, I want to write about the literary editor. That's it. If I'm writing, my second historical fiction book was about the friendship between Eleanor Roosevelt and Mary McLeod Bethune,
Yes.
and how they truly affected FDR. So I didn't need to write about all their lives. I wrote about when they met,
Mm-hmm.
and then when FDR died, because that's when they had their greatest impact as
Mm-hmm.
friends. So it's easy to decide, because I only choose a person because I want to talk about their accomplishments, and I write the story around their accomplishments.
And so if we're taking that a step further, we're talking about two very prominent folks in Black history, right? In their accomplishments and what they achieved, especially when we talk about W.E.B. Du Bois. That name rings bells all over the world. And I have a question because, and you could have not faced this at all so far, but when writing points of historical fiction, especially around a topic that could be as taboo and salacious as a scandal and love affair between Fawcett and Du Bois, um, some folks may get uncomfortable with that, right? You're sullying
Yeah,
the name of these greats
yeah.
in our society. Why do you even go there? How did you prepare yourself for those uncomfortable moments? Not even just with readers and critics, but with the characters themselves, because you talk about the trepidation you had when going into writing the
Yeah,
story.
so I had a challenge with me with
Mm.
the character. I had no idea that readers would have an issue with it. None.
Mm-hmm.
Because it wasn't like I discovered it, I was just repeating. So I thought people knew. I mean, I didn't know if people knew about their affair, but I think people knew about him,
Yeah,
you
in his
know.
in his reputation. Yeah.
And so I wasn't thinking about the readers, but you're absolutely right. There were two things that challenged me. First of all, it was W.E.B. Du Bois, but more importantly for me, it was Jessie Redmond Fawcett,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't want to take away anything from her. And then it was him, and I thought about taking it.
Oh no. Oh, let's see. I lost you for one moment there. I should be
Yes,
having.
it went out for a minute.
Let's see. I have. There you go. You're back now.
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry. We were just in talking about the aftermath, both your
Yeah, so it was
preparation and the
hard to do
aftermath.
this
Mm-hmm.
with the W.E.B. Du Bois. I had to realize, because I thought, could I write this book without the two of them having an affair? And then, if you've read the book,
You
and she's
cannot.
a writer. Writers write from their own emotions,
Yes.
their own pain, their own everything. There is no way I could have done the book without the affair, starting from why she was in New York. I could have made something up.
Mm-hmm.
But then, even the name of her first novel, There Is Confusion, was about them.
Yep.
Was about them. So
Entirely.
I would have had to name the novel.
Some of her first published
I would have
poetry
had
is
to name
about
the
them.
novel, but I would have had to make up a reason.
Mm. Yeah, because even some of
And
her
then,
first.
even her most famous poem that's in the book,
Exactly.
there's a line at the end. I would have had to make up a lie for why there was that line. And I decided to just show people how people, as writers, our lives are so intertwined with our writing.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's not our story, we cannot write with the emotions that we feel. I remember when my husband passed away. I think once he passed away, my writing became emotionally deeper, because I had experienced
Hmm.
that pain.
Hmm.
And so Jessie was writing from her pain and her love and her joy and her sorrow. She was writing from all of that. And I couldn't take away half of that with W.E.B. Du Bois.
Yeah.
And so what I decided was, these were people who were doing people things.
Hey.
And they were ordinary people who had done extraordinary things in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And the ordinariness of them, the peopleness of them, didn't take away from all of their extraordinary achievements. because while they were having an affair, she still encouraged Langston Hughes
Yep.
to write while he was in Mexico. And that's where his whole career began because of her encouragement. While they were having an affair, W.E.B. Du Bois was still the president of all black people in the
Yes, he
world.
was.
He,
Yes,
if,
he was.
if there had been a role like that, he would have won it.
Mm-hmm.
While they were having an affair, she was still helping Jean Toomer to navigate being a black
Yeah.
writer or a white writer or
Whew.
just an American writer. While they were having an affair, W.E.B. Du Bois still cared about young black men and trying to make sure every time he saw a young black man, he stopped and cared about him. He didn't care if
Mm-hmm.
he saw them in the street, he stopped. So while they were having an affair, they were still extraordinary people. And I hope that's what people take away from the book, that you can be ordinary and do extraordinary things. And
Exactly.
so that's how. The other way it was a little bit of a challenge for me was I never wanted the book to be salacious anyway. But when I got to that first scene of them being intimate, I was kind of like, ew, ew, I am not writing this. W.E.B. Du Bois is like my great great grandfather.
Right,
No,
right,
no.
right.
And so I had to find a way to still show their intimacy without it being intimate. And I think I was able to accomplish that.
I definitely would agree. I am of the school that sexual intimate scenes in movies and books do not need to leave things up to the imagination.
Yeah, we
So
all know the body parts and we
we
all know
all
where the
know it.
body parts go.
Exactly.
And so what I did was make it more mental
Yes.
for them. It was their thoughts and the emotions for them.
And so, Victoria, we're getting closer to the end of the interview, so I'll make sure we have time for some more fun moments. And so we're getting a part to the part where it's a bit of rapid fire questions. So we're gonna go through. They could be about the book, they could be about your life, and they're either very simple, one or two word answers, yes or no. And so we're gonna get through as many as we can. And then we're going to close the
Okay.
interview with any other bookish recommendations that you would like to give. Okay, so we're going to take about a minute and we're going to do some rapid fire questions starting now. Who's your favorite character in the book? You cannot pick Fawcett or Du Bois.
Her mother, my mom.
Okay, Bella. All right. Last book you could not put down and you had to take everywhere with you to read.
Yellow Wife by Shaniqua Johnson.
Oh, I just read The House of Eve by
Yes, it's
Johnson.
excellent. The House of Eve is excellent as well. But Yellow Wife, I couldn't breathe. There were moments when I
Oh
could not
wow.
breathe reading that book.
All right, I'm writing this down. I'm not going to go back to try to find that one. All right, when consuming stories, do you enjoy ebook, audiobook, or traditional mediums?
So this is going to sound strange, but I do them all
Mm-hmm.
depending on where I'm reading. So I like to read when I'm on the elliptical machine. And so the best thing for that is my Kindle, my ebook.
Mm-hmm.
And then I like the audiobook because when I'm walking back and forth to the gym or any place else, it syncs with the Kindle
Oh,
and I can just pick up there. And
oh
then when I'm
wow.
home sitting down, I like to read the actual book.
Well, that's pretty cool. So the Kindle will pick up where you were, whether you were reading it on the Kindle or listening to it. Oh, that's pretty cool. That's something I
Yes,
may have
it
to
is
try
it
out.
is synced totally.
Hmm,
That is off the chain.
that's really
So
cool.
every book I have, minimally, I have the Kindle and audio.
Hmm. I have to look into that because I know my reading schedule is getting quite hectic, and my fellow was like, "You're gonna have to. I know you don't like it, Stephanie. You're gonna have to start doing audiobooks or something, something." But I think that combination there is probably a good mix that I may be able to
That's
fit
every
into.
book I have has both. I have both of them.
Hmm. Okay. I have to. I definitely have to note that. So let's keep going here. You're on tour right now. It's crazy busy. What's one thing you do for self care?
Read, like take some time at the end of the day and just read
Mm.
my book and not my book, but the book I'm reading
Yeah.
at that point. And I take time alone
Mm.
because when you're on tour, I've been blessed. My events have been sold out, so
Mm-hmm.
200 people are showing up, and you're
Wow.
you're signing and you're smiling and you're taking pictures, and so I guard my time alone.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes when I'm in a city, even now, they would want to take me to lunch and everything, and I really appreciate it. But I know I need my time
Yeah,
alone.
you need a breather. You need some, and look, it's always a good
Yeah,
time to
I
get lost in
to
a
just
book.
even regather my own energy
Yep,
so that I have energy to give.
exactly. Okay, so keep going. Do you have a favorite drink while you're reading or writing? For example, I always have to have some hot chai next to me. I don't know what it is, but it gets me in the mood.
Well, I don't always have to have hot chai, but that's my favorite.
Oh, it is too. Oh,
My
great.
favorite is chai tea.
Yes, that is my favorite. That's exactly what I have here. I go through probably way too many cups of these a day.
That's
Uh,
my absolute favorite.
reading or writing with or without music or background noise.
So I'm really weird. I'm really weird. I have to have the TV on, but it's on mute. Like that's so weird to
It's
me.
like your
Why
accountability
is it?
partner, like looking at you.
It's just the weirdest thing. I can't have the sound, but I need to have it on. Now, also I absolutely love writing outside of my environment.
Me
So I
too.
love writing on an airplane. That's one of my favorite places
Oh
to write because
wow.
no calls are coming in, nothing.
Yeah. Uh
And
huh.
and then I love writing in like a Starbucks
Mm-hmm.
because I can shut out the activity, but the activity gives me energy.
Exactly. That's a great. I've never explained it that way, but let me actually make a note because that is a perfect way to explain it in how I feel. Because of course, I have a nice, cute, little, wonderful home office here,
Yeah.
but sometimes a little good 3 to 4 hour session at Starbucks at a cafe, just for some reason, it's just high productivity
It's
levels.
just so interesting. It's so
Mm-hmm.
motivating. But I think we are not, instead of us giving people energy, I think when they come in, I mean, they're giving us energy,
Yep.
and it's just coming from all these places, and people are rushing in and rushing, and I'm not paying attention to
Nope.
them. I'm writing,
Mm-hmm.
but I think because I used to go to Starbucks every day, like
Mm-hmm.
that was my office,
Mm-hmm.
because it was just such a good place to write.
Yeah.
I don't do that as much anymore, but I love writing outside my. I have a great, like you said, a great little office. Today I'm in a hotel room. I
Mm-hmm.
have a great little office at home, but I love getting outside of my environment.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I love a good cafe, and that's something I seek when I'm out of town, especially if I'm out of town on conference. I'm like, what's the neighborhood cafe? Like, where can I find it? And so yeah, the cafe background noise it really does help. Like you said, it's not that it's the energy you get from around you. Do you have any pets?
No,
No
no.
pets.
I used to tell my daughter when she wanted one.
Uh huh.
I used to tell my husband and my daughter, I don't like anything smaller than me.
Hmm.
And my daughter used to say, I'm smaller than you, Mama. And I would be like, well, I said I don't like nothing smaller than me.
At least you'll grow out of it.
I should have told her that. I mean, she has grown out of it for sure. She's 35 now, but I was like, I don't like nothing smaller than me.
And I don't know your daughter's name, but one of my best friends, Crystalline Washington, is her line sister. And when I was telling
Oh,
folks
Monique.
how excited I was about the interview today, she texted me back. She's like, "That's my line sister's mom," and I'm like, "How cool! What the small world." So maybe we'll
That
talk
is
more
really
offline about
cool.
that. That is really
That's really
cool.
cool. I'll tell Monique.
Yes. So yeah, but my friend's name is Crystalline, but yeah, we're it was so cool when I told her. She's like, that's my line sister's mom, and I'm like, I'll give you a shout out. And it didn't. I said if it comes up, I'll ask her about it, and it came up. All right. So last question. Oh, two more questions. Last read, and you don't. Some folks don't always comfortable asking this question, answering this question, but last read that was a do not finish, and not because you didn't have the time, but because wasn't for me.
Yeah, so I would not feel
Okay.
comfortable
All right. We'll move
I
on to
wouldn't.
the next one. Some folks
Yeah,
like it's funny.
only because I'm an author
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want to do that to other authors.
It's a question I purposely asked to be a little controversial, but I often find
Yeah,
that
I think that's a really good question
yeah.
because I've seen influencers on Instagram talking about do not finish, and there have been some Harlem Rhapsody do not finish, and you
Oh,
don't really like that. So
well, I think that's one of the things I always put in my book reviews. Like, who would I really? There's never a book that I'm not going to recommend, except sometimes never know. We get all kinds of crazy arcs and stuff that come through here, but um, it's never. It's always who is this book best for? Like, who would I recommend this book to, and who may not like this book, right? Because not every book is for everyone, but there is a story for everybody. And so I always ask this question because depending on what comes up, that's usually what the response is. It's not, this is what I didn't like about the book because, but it doesn't mean that someone else wouldn't like it, right? So last question, who was the last person you read aloud to, one on one?
oh, it's easy. My granddaughter,
What story was
Aria.
it? Uh
So
huh.
I read to her one page, and then she reads to me the next page.
Oh, yes, that's what I used to do with my
Yeah,
daughter.
that's easy.
Yeah.
Aria and I read together all the time. She's 6, and we're getting ready to write a book together. So,
Yay! Oh wow! I can't wait. That's so exciting. As a grandmother, I know that must make you extremely ecstatic and happy to be able to share not only your talents with her, but part of your joy and what brings you joy in the world as
yeah,
well.
my love for reading, it was so interesting. She's in kindergarten, and the teacher asked Monique, my daughter, like, does she read a lot? Because Monique reads to the class. I mean,
Mm,
not Monique. Aria reads to the class.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because she likes when she reads to me, and like she'll set up her little dolls in my house, and she'll read to me and her dolls, and
Mm-hmm.
then she has to sit with the dolls, and I get to read to her. So it's a little game we have.
That you're building it early, that passion for storytelling and reading, just like the grown folks in your life did with you. In
Yeah.
particular, I did catch that moment you said earlier when your dad used to get copies of the book and you guys would read it together and to discuss it and how that made it. I don't know if that's something you discovered that Jessie actually did with her dad or your own dedication
So
to
that's a really
your.
good point.
Uh huh.
I don't know that Jessie did that with her dad, but that was what I did with my dad. And I can
It's
imagine
lovely.
her relationship with her father being
Exactly.
very similar to my relationship with my father.
Yeah. It
Because
was.
I do know that, she was one of 7 children,
Mm,
and 5 of them passed away before they were 20.
yeah.
And she was the baby who he lost his wife.
Mm-hmm.
His wife got sick during her childbirth and then died not too long after. So Jessie didn't remember her own mother. So I imagine that as the baby who survived,
They were very
that
close.
she had to be the apple of her father's eye.
Yeah, the way you,
And
I was going to say, the way you intertwined that story and how it transitioned into sort of what she was seeking from Du Bois. And I think it was a great way to play that out. I love the scene and imagery between her father and her sharing that sort of intellectual bond.
yeah, and then
Mm-hmm.
that's what she ended up doing with the boy,
Yep,
right? And
exactly.
the reason as a historical fiction writer, you have to extrapolate
Mm-hmm.
so much, and so it's something. So it's almost like seeds are left for you because her father died January 3rd, 1903,
Hmm.
and 3 days after the new year began, she reached out to W.E.B. Du Bois. Fact, 3 days before that same year ended,
Wow.
like the same amount of time, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so I just imagine that that was the bridge for her.
Yeah.
She was only 20 years old, still needed, and 20-year-olds 100 years ago are not 20-year-olds today
Mm-hmm.
because they couldn't even live by themselves. They couldn't, vote. And so I can imagine that she still just needed that father figure in her life. And for the first 10 years of their friendship, of knowing each other, that's what he was. He
Yep.
was a great mentor to her.
Yep. Um, so we're coming on at the end of the interview, and I always like to end asking for bookish recommendations for my guests. And this could be another read or book that you would recommend to viewers, a person or organization that we should check out, or upcoming events. And this could feel free to plug your upcoming tour stops because I know plenty of folks will want to know where you're going to be and where they could meet you next.
So my tour stops are on my website because I don't even know where I'm going to be next. I feel like I have been so many places and so many things. So my website, which is my name,
Yes.
victoriachristophermurray.com. You said a read or something that's an organizational tip or
Either a read that you would recommend, another book that you would recommend that you've enjoyed recently, or a bookish organization or person that you think that we should check out.
ooh. Ooh, so I mentioned Yellow White, which
Mm-hmm.
in the last 5 years, and I've read some really good books. That book was one of the best books I've read because
Wow.
I've never read a book that took my breath away. Like it
Wow.
is so haunting and so wonderful at the same
Hmm.
time. It is amazing. And so that is on one end of the scale. And then Kennedy Ryan is a new writer that I've kind of discovered.
Okay.
I say new writer. She's been writing for 20 years, so it ain't that new. But I have adore her writing.
Mm-hmm.
It's considered romance, and romance is not a genre that I
Me
read.
neither. Me neither. Mm-hmm.
But I can't imagine that that's just romance. And they said that it's romance because that's the driving force.
Mm.
But she teaches you so much about things that we go through every day. One of her books was about grief and finding yourself during that period. Another was about having autistic
Mm.
children. One is a woman that I didn't know anything about lupus and finding love in the middle of all of that.
Wow.
I love Kennedy Ryan.
Wow. All right, Kennedy Ryan, it is. And for folks listening or viewing right now, when I post the edited highlights, I'll make sure to include links to all the reason recommendations Victoria and I brought up today. So again, Victoria Christopher Murray, author of the new 2025 publication, critically acclaimed Harlem Rhapsody, an astounding work of historical fiction about the life and legacy of literary editor Jessie Redmond Fawcett. Victoria, thank you so much again for taking time out of your busy tour schedule to make some time here with Books and Bounty.
No, thank you for reaching out to me. It was a delight for me, and you can tell that I don't know. I can't keep my own schedule because I was scheduling you while I was on the
I know
train and
Kim,
all kinds of things.
your assistant Kim was like, "What's going on?" And I'm like, she got it together though.
No,
She's
that was my
good.
fault.
She's
Kim
great.
was telling me, "Do not schedule anything. You're gonna mess it up for both of us." She always tells me that.
But we
But
got
you
it
were
in
so
order.
excited, and I was so excited, and I was
Exactly.
like, "Oh, girl."
Yeah. But she figured it out. So thanks. Shout out to Kim, Victoria's assistant.
Yes.
She got the job done. All right, Victoria. Well, concludes our interview today. I'll make sure to get all the links and once it's posted out to you. But thanks again for
Oh,
everyone out there. Go pick up Harlem Rhapsody. Support your local bookstores or online indie booksellers. And if not, you can always get it for free at your local library. So again, thanks for turning the page with us, Victoria. Enjoy your tour, and I hope you get some rest this weekend.
thank you. Bye bye. Thank you so much.
See ya. All right, everyone, that just leaves us with a few more things to talk about upcoming for Books and Bounty. First, again, huge shout out, big thank you to Victoria Christopher Murray to taking time out of her busy tour schedule to stop in with Books and Bounty to talk not only about her book, great book, just finished reading it. We've been reading it all week together, Harlem Rhapsody, which is a story of historical fiction about the first literary editor of the Crisis magazine, which is the official publication of the NAACP, Jessie Redmond Fawcett. We also discussed about her transitioning careers from financial corporate to creative storyteller, what her support system looks like, and the importance of having those people in your circle that will constantly remind you of what your passion is and where your focus should be. As well as just we had a good rapid fire session to get to know more about Victoria and her day to day. So we'll be posting highlights for that over the next couple of weeks. You guys look out for it. This weekend we will be doing another weekend readathon. This time we were going to be binging graphic novels. So to do that, we're going to be doing a few things. I'm still waiting for my graphic copy of the adaptation of Parable of the Sower. Cross your fingers that it's going to get here today or tomorrow. But until then, in the meantime, between time, I'm actually going to reread tonight. All of it. No, it's not all of it. We'll see how far we get. Parable of the Sower, and that's where we're going to start off. The other two graphic novels for this weekend's graphic novel binge session will be, where are they? Here they are. Here are my reading books. So we have a few. Two of them are thick, so this is probably, I'm thinking this readathon is actually going to extend into early next week, which is fine. I'll probably have until Monday or Tuesday before I have to turn to my next book. But we will be reading two graphic novels from local authors, Brownstone and Firebird. We will be engaging in reading that's not the right bookmark, but we will be engaging with the graphic novel Vixen by Jasmine Walls and Manu Azumi. This is the March selection for the Sister Sci-Fi Graphic Novel Club. And finally, continuing one of the series that I really enjoyed from last year's graphic novel spotlight, and that's Abbott 1973. So Abbott was one of the first graphic novels recommended to me when I went up and took a bit of a bookish trip with my teenager to New York, and we stopped at Midtown Comics, and Grim.World, he goes by Grim.World on Instagram, gave me a stack of recommendations. Abbott was in it. Oh, wait. No. I don't know if Abbott was in that first stack. I think Skyward was in that first stack. This was actually in the first stack from Dreamers and Make Believers for graphic novels. And immediately fell in love with this character. Camera-toting journalist from 1970s Detroit, chain smoking, vanquishes things with the flash of her camera, fighting the powers that be, not only when it comes to racial and economic discrimination, that's not the right word I'm looking for. It's not the right word I'm looking for, but she's a badass. And not only that, I really like the artwork. I usually don't like really bold lines in this, but for some reason it works with this art. It's saturated in bold colors, but it's grungy, and I like it. So that'll be a quick read. So it's a lot. I have lofty goals for this weekend. We'll see what we can do. And then the last weekend of the month, we will be reading. Let me go back and look at my own reading schedule here. Make sure I'm not telling you guys wrong. Actually, I can bring it up on screen. Hold on. There it is. So here are the book club selections. That's not the one I want. Readathon. So again, we're reading Abbott, two graphic novels from local authors, Firebird and Brownstone, and then Parable of the Sower. Now, I don't know why. I know I've had this series, Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents by Octavia Butler in my collection, in my library, but it is not around. They are not around. I could not find them. I went looking in my daughter's stuff to see if they had my copies for school or something. I don't know where they are, but I know we won't talk about that. My last move and getting rid of things and frustrating and going too quickly. So I'm thinking that it may have, but if they are gone, then I know it went to donated books or used bookstore, and I'm fine with that. So Parable of the Sower. It's a pretty hefty novel, right? It's almost 400 pages. But I think this is, knowing the way I read and the way Butler writes, I think I can get this done pretty quickly. So I'm going to be reading this while I take breathers and get through some of these graphic novels, and then we'll end with the graphic novel adaptation of Parable of the Sower. And then the last weekend in March will be, and the last weekend in every month will be dedicated to new and emerging authors or ARC Reads. ARC is Advanced Readers Copies. And this is not his debut novel, but I think it's going to be one of his first hits. And this is The Ghost of Gwendolyn Montgomery by Clarence Henderson. So we're going to be reading that the last weekend in March. I want to take a few notes in my reading journal about tonight's show in accordance with the book and tie some things together with what I just learned from Victoria and how she went about writing the book. So I'm going to take some moments to do that, as well as cook dinner for the fam, and settle in for the weekend readathon sometime closer to this evening. I think I'll be back on around 8 o'clock. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, make sure that you are viewing, watching, and following on Twitch. I see we have some new followers out there. Aria Card 88, thank you so much for the follow. And then if we want to look at what's happening or what I'll be reading during the week, it's in accordance mainly right now with book club reading. So the first book club of the month is going to be meeting this coming Monday, and that is the graphic novel, and that is Black Girls Horror Guide with Emma Akpan, known as at Eminism on Instagram and other places. We are reading short story collection Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. There are 8 stories in here. I have read 5 out of 8. So I can consider it enough to participate in the book club. That's why I love short story collections. But they're good. So I want to finish the other one. And again, this is Her Body and Other Parties. Let's see if you guys can see this. I'm going to hide it real quick. Her Body and Other Parties. Again, this is hosted by Emma Akpan at Eminism by Carmen Maria Machado. And then on the following week, on March 22nd, 2 book club meetings. First, an in-person book club. We'll be meeting down at T-Volve here in Baltimore, Maryland, and that's the Be More Reads book club hosted by Wit. You saw them for the first time earlier this year where we created vision boards. Where's mine? Together with the book club and had a silent reading meetup. There's mine. Mm-hmm. There's B. No, that's Huey. Or Ben. We don't know his name yet. Where's B? There's B. B in State, Mage Steph. But anyway, we made vision boards with Be More Book Club, and their March selection is a nonfiction. I haven't read nonfiction in a while, so I'm excited about, see how I'm going to get into this one because it is a very, very interesting current historical figure, and that is the Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. Her memoir, Lovely One. And then later on that evening, I'll be meeting up with Sister Sci-Fi's Graphic Novel Club. It's a virtual meeting club that evening at 4 o'clock, where we'll be discussing Vixen NYC by Jasmine Walls. And then finally, I don't know the date yet for the Close Read book club, which is a book club hosted by well-read Black girl, Gloria Edom. I don't know when the next date is, and let me actually go take a look now to see if there's any updates. I don't see upcoming meetings. So we have to get some updates on that. But anyway, I'm going to continue to read on that schedule just in case, because I actually may be co-hosting that meeting of the book club for Close Read for James. But to do so, and in order to be fully informed, you guys know I got to do some research. I'm not only going to be reading about what other people have said about the book and considering that among my own opinions, but I'm going back to Huckleberry Finn. Found my copy, good old classic version, and I'm going to go through this again and see if the outcome of this could be a tandem read with James. We'll see if I can produce such a guide. There's not enough hours in the day, but that's what I would like the outcome to be to both the tandem, the between this and James, as well as the graphic adaptation of Parable of the Sower, and the traditional medium, the traditional novel, to have a sort of tandem read guide out of that as well. So it's exciting, fun stuff ahead. But in the meantime, I'm gonna take a break. The kid is home, so check in with them, see how they're doing, how their day was, what the schedule's looking like this weekend, make dinner, and the fella should be home from work in a little bit as well. So I'll probably be popping back in here to kick off the weekend reading marathon around 8 tonight. And I think I have it posted on the Twitch schedule as well. So in the meantime, in between time, make sure you follow and subscribe. Subscriptions get you not only get rid of those pesky ads, but it also gives you exclusive access to emotes to use in the live chat, as well as access to the Discord server. You will all, and some of the special activities we do with authors there. You'll also, and while you're there and while you're at it, make sure you support the stream. You can find out the hub for all things here on Books and Bounty, all things that you see at social media. It all gets centered and filtered into booksandbounty.com. So you can check out previous highlights, book reviews, as well as live event coverage, what's going on with Books and Bounty events, how do you get on the reading list, other promo and engagement opportunities that are out there for self-publishing authors, indie publishing houses and writers collective, as well as our independent booksellers and bookstores. Because my job here, ultimately, and my mission with Books and Bounty is to use publishing acumen and our growing bookish community to amplify Black and Indigenous voices, women writers, independent book publishers and sellers, as well as local literary arts. So thank you for taking the time today with myself, Desk Time with Steph, featuring Victoria Christopher Murray. Happy writing and reading, everyone. And until later this evening, toodles.